Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining. Now, today we are going to look at Trump's America and its control of the world. Well, America has been controlling the world for a long, long time. In fact, America was founded on the principles of imperialism. And the more you read, the more you delve into history, it's the more that you understand that the United States was created for a purpose. And if you read also the prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation, particularly those, Daniel 2, 7, Revelation 13, 17, and 18, you'd understand that the United States is playing her prophetic role. This is not about Donald Trump. This is about a unique position that has been given to this most powerful country in the history of humanity. Now, there are those of us who like to side with the United States, particularly those of us or those people who live in the United States and think that the United States is the most powerful country and I am going to be defended. But that is not so, right? You must understand that empires are not sensitive, are not compassionate, are not sympathetic to anyone, neither to their citizens. So we must understand the plight that people bear, the fear that they have in the world over what Donald Trump, but not only what Donald Trump is doing, because dare I say that the Obamas and the Clintons and the Bushes, have done, the Bidens have done in the world, but you weren't paying attention. When it's Democrats in the White House, you don't pay attention. And then the platform, the foundation is laid on which a person who is much more, up in your face with what he does, like Trump. So Trump, give him his credit, is someone who is telling us what the empire is doing. He does not hide the face of the empire. He lets you know that this empire is fascistic and that it practices fascism wherever it goes, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans. But it's time for us now to educate ourselves and to become much more independent-minded and critical thinkers. Because if you think Kamala had come into power, things were going to be better, you are making a sad mistake. And that is what many of us in the Caribbean like to believe, that had Kamala, had the Democrats been elected, that our world would have seen peace, at least in the Caribbean. Things would have been going great, right? Even though Haiti was being bombarded, right? And we saw what was happening in Venezuela under the Biden's administration, under Biden administration, I should say. But let us look at what the Gleaner reported yesterday. And very important that we begin now to pay attention and to become an independent country, because we depend so much on the United States that every little thing that they say, we have to do, right? Because all the CARICOM meeting and they're going to meet, they're just trying to show you that they're important, but they cannot undo what is, because we're not powerful. Notice how Trump dealt with Zelensky in the office yesterday. And, somebody commented that Trump, would not have dealt with the president of Israel in that way. Or even in Russia, he would not have spoken to the Russian President Vladimir Putin in the way that he actually, spoke to Zelensky. But, if you read Trump and you look at his actions, you'll realize that Trump is a person who respects strength. And the Caribbean is by no stretch of the imagination a strong region, right? We would depend on these so-called colonial powers to protect us and also to give us aid. So we have to do whatever they say. And that is why Trump spoke to Zelensky. If he had Andrew Holness, if he had Mia Mottley, if he had any of the sitting prime ministers of the Caribbean, he would have treated them likewise, right? He would have roughed them up. He would have let them know, I should say. He would have let them know that he is in power and that they definitely do not have the, what you call it now, any negotiation tool, right, to negotiate with Trump. And the Gleaner is reporting yesterday that CARICOM foreign ministers meet to discuss U.S. position on Cuban medical brigade. So we're hearing that the United States is going to revoke visas of those countries, or the citizens from these countries who have Cuban doctors and nurses there. So Caribbean community foreign ministers met on Friday to discuss the United States' decision to revoke the visas of foreign government officials whose countries employ Cuban nurses and doctors. Now, that is something incredible. On the morning of Friday, February 28th, as Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, I represented Trinidad and Tobago at a special meeting of CARICOM's, that's what we call COFCOR, which is our Council for Foreign and Community Relationships, Dr. Amory Brown said. This meeting was convened specifically to discuss a CARICOM response to the announcement from the State Department regarding states working with the Cuban Medical Brigade. Now, I don't know if you have noticed, if you have read, but the State Department is no longer diplomatic, and it has been so for years. They do not practice diplomacy as you have been told. 93% of the State Department's budget goes towards the military-industrial complex. So whatever is in the State Department, whatever comes from the State Department is just a matter of militarizing, as it were, whatever country that they find themselves in. Now, I must say again that depending on how strong a region or a country is, the United States deals with them differently. So the United States is not going to deal with CARICOM in the same way it deals with Russia. It's not going to do that because Russia has much more tools to deal with the United States. The United States is in fair, right? Has some amount of fair, for what Russia is able to do. But there's nothing that the Caribbean region can do to the United States of America. And stop thinking about Trump and begin now to get some books about the US empire and begin to read essentially about the characteristics of world empires throughout history and to the present moment, because the United States is not doing, under Trump, is not doing anything that the United States, is not there to do, or any empire would not have done. But you have become so mesmerized with Trump because you're listening to your CNNs and your MSNBCs, and you think that they are telling you the truth. But far from it, because they're also on board with whatever Trump is doing. They're just trying to counter him, to add controversy, because controversy breeds a lot of people like that. They like to hear anything that is controversial, sensationalist, gossips, and stuff like that. And that is exactly what you like. And you listen to MSNBCs and the CNNs and the Foxes of the world. Right? But more intelligent people are going to gather good books and they are going to sit down and think for themselves, which many of us are not able to do. Now, this is going to be another, hassle for the Caribbean, as it were. Now, early this week, U.S. Secretary of State, that is Secretary of State Marco Rubio, said Washington was announcing the expansion of an existing Cuba-related visa restriction policy that targets forced labor linked to the Cuban labor export program. So it means, therefore, that they're about to end, as it were, this Cuban export program, which is going to create a lot of poverty for Cuba. This expanded policy applies to current or former Cuban government officials and other individuals, including foreign government officials, who are believed to be responsible for or involved in the Cuban labor export program, particularly Cuba's overseas medical missions. Rubio, the son of Cuban immigrants who left Cuba in pursuit of the American dream, said in a statement posted on the U.S. Department of State's website that the new policy also applies to the immediate family members of those supporting the Cuban program. So that is very, very interesting. The department has already taken steps to impose visa restrictions on several individuals, including Venezuelans, under this expanded policy. So you know that the government officials are going to go along with what the U.S. says because they're the boys and girls, right? Even the Mia Motley's, she's going to have to obey the orders coming from Washington because that is how the show is run. And, one of the things is that when we find these things, we understand that the government will play two-faced, right? It will show you one face in the public and say that they, of course, denounce and they are not in agreement and, all of the niceties that they would like to say to you and say that they stand up and they support the Cubans. But behind the scenes, they have to be like little boys and girls. And they have to toe the line with Washington because that is how the show is run, whether it's the IMF or the World Bank or the State Department, the CARICOM countries, the Caribbean region will have to toe the line, right? They will just have to toe the line because we have not formed a region that is strong enough, a block that is strong enough. In fact, CARICOM can also be totally, demolished because it's not serving any purpose. They just like to meet and to spend money that the average citizen is not benefiting from. Now, additionally, CARICOM foreign ministers are arranging a meeting with a U.S. Special Envoy for our region to take place in Washington in the second week of March, Brown said. Now, they're all talking, and it's all a bunch of talk, and he says and she says, and nothing of any substance that is happening here. Now, at least 473 Cuban medical personnel worked alongside their Caribbean counterparts in 8 countries: Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to assist in managing the spread of COVID-19. So that is interesting, and we know that the Cuban doctors and nurses have been instrumental in pushing and keeping our fragile medical system intact, be it in Jamaica or other parts of the Caribbean. So what is going to happen now? Because we don't have the money to pay our nurses, and nurses are leaving in droves. Now, is this sort of visa restriction going to affect the citizens, or is it only going to affect the government officials? Only time will tell. Only time will tell what the United States is doing. But as I've suggested on many occasions, we can see that the dragon-like characteristic of the United States is now on full swing and is on full display. And we've now got to see and to watch carefully, more closely, at what is happening and how this is going to impact the world. We're seeing already that Donald Trump, along with his enablers and abettors. Remember now that Donald Trump is not the one running the show. The military-industrial complex is the one running the show. And they will also create controversies and say Trump is wrong here and Trump is this, and you love that. You love the controversy. But at the end of the day, they unite and they have their bipartisan agreements in Congress, and they laugh at the American people. They deride them. They deride the American people, saying that you're just a bunch of fools who just go to the polls every 4 years and vote for the same people, right? You vote for the same people, not understanding that we do not do, neither are we obliged. Neither are we obliged to do what you tell us or what you want us to do, right? This is the reality of what is happening in the United States. But it's time now for us to wake up and to understand that the United States is not going to be now in retreat. It has been on a forward move, particularly after 9/11, for full spectrum dominance. And it wants dominance, total dominance. It does not want a multipolar world, whether it's Democrats in power or it's the Republicans. The only thing the Republicans tell you that they don't want, they want a unipolar world, while the Democrats fool you, right? They deceive you by making you think that they are desirous of a multipolar world. And in your little minds, with your little minds, can't think, oh, I'm not voting for Trump because, I'm voting for a multipolar world. Now, where is this multipolar world that you were living in? It wasn't under Obama. We saw what happened to Libya and Syria and other countries that Obama used drones to have attacked because they were not towing the line with Washington's either economic policy or military policy or political policy. So if you're still living and you're listening to the Cliff Hughes and the Dion Jackson Millers and you think that they're telling you the news, right? You need to get up and you need to wake up and see that they're not, because they're also corporate controlled, and these media houses are corporate run and they gain money. Let me repeat that and until you get it in your cranium. The more controversies is the more they reap in more money, because that is what titivates your imagination. You love gossips, you love controversies. And at the end of the day, you learn nothing from these controversies, and we gain nothing from them. We gain nothing from them economically, politically, or in whatever capacity, mentally, intellectually, right? So I would like to see how this is going to play out, how this is going to affect our health sector in the region and perhaps in the world at large, because we're hearing that Venezuela is also included, right? Venezuela is also included. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, what happens when the United States decides to do the same thing for Chinese? What happens when it gets to the Chinese? You can't have Chinese investment. You can't do any business with China. What is going to happen to the region? What is going to happen to the region? And that day is fast approaching. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe, and to like the videos so many people can see the videos online and that they will eventually subscribe. Subscribe to the channel so that we can grow and we can spread truth and, you know, intellectual information to the world, right? Because that's the purpose of the channel. See you then.